Hello everybody, hope you're having a great day. Today we'll be talking about how to use manual settings on your camera, just like all the pros do. So let's get right into it. Let's clear some basics off the back. So before you start and do anything with your camera, please set your image quality to RAW. That's RAW, not JPEG. Trust me, it's better, right? I want to do a strict comparison video between RAW and JPEG in the future, so stay tuned for that, because I want to know myself in a more or less scientific test to show you what the real difference is between RAW and JPEG. Right, so the first thing that we're going to look at is shutter speed. What is shutter speed? The shutter speed number is measured in seconds. So you might have a 1/100, so that's 1/100th of a second that your sensor is exposed to light. Meaning the slower the shutter speed, the lighter your image, and the faster the shutter speed, the darker your image. You should also just watch out when shooting handheld with the shutter speed though, because if your image is still too dark and you crank down the shutter to about, let's say, 1/40th of a second, and you're shooting on a 50mm lens on an APS-C, which gives you about 75mm equivalent, that will mean that you will have camera shake, very probably. I wouldn't go beyond 1/80 seconds when shooting handheld, just to be on the safe side that you don't have visible camera shake, because that will just ruin your image. Now let's talk about my favorite topic, aperture. The aperture is just fantastic. Basically what aperture is, in your lens you have different blades and they close together into a circle, and the aperture number determines how small or how large that circle is, which also then determines again how much or how little light is let into your camera. The lower the aperture number, the more light is let onto your sensor. The bigger the aperture number, so depending on your lens, your aperture might vary and go up to, let's say, f/18 or f/22. That will mean that the circle is very small and will therefore also let in less light, creating a darker image. Another thing that aperture does is it determines how shallow the depth of field is in your image. So that means if you're shooting on a lens like mine that I'm shooting on, it's a 50mm 1.8. 1.8 is already pretty low. That means that you get beautiful background bokeh, you know, these wonderful circles that everybody wants, and it will just create a nice looking image with a subject that's clearly separated from the back and the foreground. How wide your aperture can go will definitely depend on the lens, and usually the wider the aperture, the more expensive the lenses get. But that is not to mean that higher aperture numbers are useless. If you're shooting landscapes, for example, a more narrow aperture of about f/8 will give you a lovely image in which basically everything is in focus. So that means that you don't have a clear subject that's separated from the background, but it will mean that for landscapes, everything is nice and sharp, which creates a nice overall image. So you've now joined me at my desk because I just noticed that my camera had stopped recording during the video, cutting out the last part, which is the ISO. So let's tackle this really quickly. Your ISO basically controls your sensor's light sensitivity. So you have a base ISO of 100, and the higher you go with your ISO number, the more sensitive your sensor is to light, and the lighter your image is in the end. You just have to be a bit careful with the ISO, because the higher you go, the more noise is created in your image. So you have a bit of grain, you probably know that. That is individual for every camera, how strong this grain is. So I just check in the internet for your individual camera, just type into Google usable ISO on, and then just put your camera name in. And there's loads of information there, and you'll surely find the threshold to your ISO, how high you can go before the images start to look unusable. And when you know the ISO number at which your camera still performs well, you can confidently use it in low light situations. So that's it. Might as well do the outro here. I have a part 2 coming out next week on how to shoot video in manual settings. Hope you're interested in that. And I also hope that you could learn something today. But as always, practice makes perfect. And I know it can be very intimidating with all the buttons at the beginning and all the functions. So just go out and shoot a little, practice to get that muscle memory going so you can change your settings nice and quickly, and then you'll get better in no time. But until then, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and if you support what I do, you can also drop a like down there. And until then, I'll see you in the next one.